Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of the Music Career Study Group. My name is Kevin Bruner. Joining me is Chris Robley. And Chris, I was able to do it. I was able to repost this on Reverb Nation. On
You got it
Facebook
done in time.
before the opening video ended, which is always, I'm like, oh, come on.
Well,
Any-
also people might not know there's like when we press go live and the little intro video plays, there's a delay on it showing up on Facebook or whatever. So we're always like,
Yes.
seconds to spare.
Yes. So this is the Music Career Study Group. If you were watching, let us know where you're watching from. Say hi in the comments. Like or share the video. That would help us a lot. Get the word out that we're doing these live streams. And today, it's our last Music Career Study Group of the year. And we're going to recap some of the biggest stories in music. The music business world from this year. It was quite a crazy year, Chris.
It was a crazy year across many sectors, segments of the industry, whether it's concerts or tech developments, all sorts of stuff. But I also want to make sure so people know this is an open discussion. We want to know, what do you think is the biggest music news story of the year? We all kind of have different angles on what we think is most important, most relevant. So definitely let us know.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with the Music Career Study Group, we do these weekly and they're interactive. We get the artist community together. We usually have a topic that Chris and I blab on about, but we want to hear your thoughts, your comments, what you're trying, what you're doing, what success you're seeing. And this week we're talking about the biggest news stories. So it could be a story that impacted you personally and your music career, or it could just be something that you're paying attention to. You've been wondering what's going on with certain things. There's a lot happening in the music world these days.
Yeah. Well, should we get into it, or do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, we could give it another minute or so as people get signed on. Anything big? I mean, you got any big plans the next couple of weeks?
Yes, actually, I'm gonna try to use the downtime during the holidays to overhaul my email marketing for my own music. That involves lots of automated sequences I have to rebuild, and cleansing my list of bounced all the good list hygiene. Boring marketing stuff is what I'm gonna be doing.
I'm laughing because I always I'm going to do this over the holidays, something like what you're saying.
And you get none of it.
I'm like, I don't want to do that. That sounds like work. I'll do that during work weeks. No, well, good luck with that. Malia, we will have, that did make the list.
He gets a dishonorable mention for sure.
So yeah, I've got like 4 or 5 song ideas that are in production that I'm trying to get finished up over the holidays. I've actually been upping my music production game a little bit lately, and so yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing over the holidays. Doing a lot of recording, not going many places, just because why?
Just making some more pop dance hits in the BandLab app.
Yeah, man, you got to do it. Yeah, the auto-tuned options in the BandLab app are insane. If you haven't tried it out, you should try out BandLab just for those options. They are so good and easy to use, and it makes life better.
And you always talk crap about your own singing and say you really need the auto tune.
Oh, I do.
I don't believe you though. I'm not sure how much.
Yeah, I do for sure. Again, you're watching the Music Career Study Group. Today, we are talking about the biggest music business news stories of 2024. This is our final Music Career Study Group of 2024, and we'll be back at the beginning of 2025 to talk about our predictions for what 2025 may have in store for us. We've got Leah, I'm going to say it's probably how you pronounce it. Leah from Germany. Excellent. Hello. Thanks for joining us.
And then Malia saying BandLab's great. Even used it to record some acoustic piano and it sounded great. How do they do it?
It's magic. It's magic. All right. Well, let's dive in, Chris. And I like if you want to follow along on the Reverb Nation blog, there is an article. If we could probably drop it in the comments. I've got it right here if you don't have it, Chris.
Just posted it.
Okay.
So yeah, click that link that's in the comments now, and you can
follow along. That's on the Reverb Nation blog. I like how Chris grouped everything because there was a lot of news stories and there was some pretty specific buckets or themes that things fell into. So how do you want to start this off, Chris?
Well, we just go through category by category, if that makes sense. The first one is one that I feel like it's almost the most coverage in the big media, certainly in the music news, music industry news media. And yet, in some way, I think it's the least important to independent artists. And that is just simply that the economy, at least the investment economy, is definitely on the upswing. And after the big kind of downturn in 2022, money is back in the space and lots of sales and acquisitions are happening. There was the Hipgnosis Song Fund that got sold. Private equity is, scooping up stakes in different royalty collection societies. And then I think the story we hear the most is that big proven catalogs by bands like Pink Floyd and Queen, artists like Michael Jackson, are selling for, the GDP of a small nation. And like $1.3 billion, Sony Music bought Queen's recorded music and publishing catalog for that amount. So clearly there is money going around again. Again, I don't think it impacts indie artists that much, except that it might be a world where development and new brands or consolidated brands make it a kind of more quickly shifting landscape, I guess I'll say.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because I felt like there was a wave of this a couple of years ago, like maybe around 2020, 2019, where all these artists that you figured were the kind of artists they're like, I'll never sell, suddenly selling their catalog.
Like Neil Young.
Yes, exactly. And, I think there is one major thing here that independent artists can take away from, and it's something, if you've heard me speak over the years, you would have heard me say, is that the way you make money in music, whether you're a label or an artist, is by building a catalog. And these just prove that out, that these catalogs, it's not just one song, it's not just one album, it's a catalog of songs that over time have value and maintain value. And those have, can be traded in the marketplace. For independent artists, building a catalog, usually, where we have seen artists suddenly, like going, wow, all of a sudden I'm able to, it didn't just go from paying part of my bills, music went to paying all of my bills. It's like they hit some point where they amassed enough that it just becomes a snowball effect. Each new album adds to the avalanche of money that comes their way.
Well, and also the fact that large companies are willing to shell out large sums of money to buy proven songs or entire catalogs by artists does kind of just reemphasize how important it is to keep the at-bats going, keep making songs, because eventually if you have a successful song that's placed in a film or a TV show, now it's a known quantity, it's all the more likely to get continued sync placements and continued traction. So like it's just, what's that saying? Winners beget winners or something. It's just, so keep trying, keep making those songs.
Yeah. Yep. The honey badgers are in Delaware.
What's up, honey badgers? I saw them recently.
Yeah, so that was our first section. And you mentioned all of them. We don't need to hang out on those stories very long. They're pretty self-explanatory, but I think it is important building a catalog. Those are always going to be, I think, continue to drive value, catalog, not just individual artist pieces. I know that part of Small Town Poets, our catalog is owned by Capitol Records. One of our records is, and I talked to them about getting it back because it's probably our least known album. And they're like, it's not doing anything. It's not making us any money, but we're We own catalog. That's where they said we're owned by Comcast, and their whole strategy is to own content. So we're just going to own as much content as possible.
And did they give you that definitive answer finally? Because I know it was like questionable whether they would relinquish
that.
the
Well, that was that one. The other catalog that we have, I'm trying to get back, and there will be an update on that in the new year.
Nice. Well, the next category, well, we should say if anyone's just tuning in, we're discussing the biggest news stories of 2024 in the music industry. And if you have opinions on any of this, we'd love to hear what you think the biggest story was. But the next set of events were all related to lawsuits and copyright. So maybe I'll just go through them. And then, Kevin, if you have something to say on any of them, just interrupt me.
All right.
So I think it was a very momentous year for lawsuits because we're in this sort of uncertain future with AI and stuff, and we'll get into AI, but a lot of these things are sort of looking to set new kinds of precedent as we look at this frontier of new developments. So, and the first isn't one of those tales, but it's the Department of Justice going after Live Nation Ticketmaster for having an unfair monopoly in the concert and ticketing business. I don't think that one's too much of a surprise, but it was a huge story. The next one, which I thought was really interesting and full of drama, is Drake and Kendrick Lamar had this, super well publicized rap battle where they went back and forth, and accusations were made. Whether those bordered on libel, I don't know. I'm not an expert. But when it got really weird is when Drake sued the parent company of his label, that also happens to be the parent company of Kendrick Lamar's label, claiming that they picked a side in this rap battle and used a bunch of unethical tactics to inflate the streaming numbers of Kendrick Lamar's song in this rivalry. So basically streaming fraud, as well as very shady deals made. These are accusations, of course, shady deals made with Spotify and Apple Music and whoever else for this preferential placement across their platform in exchange for like giving up some portion of their royalties. I think for the first time ever, this label completely like whitelisted Kendrick Lamar's song on YouTube monetization and Twitch monetization, meaning like they're saying, hey, we're not going to do any copyright claims. Use it as you like. Anyways, Drake was pissed and said, this is completely unfair. I'm going to sue my own label. And we'll see how it plays out in court. I just think it's interesting, but it's also sort of hilarious that this rap battle is now like being what's the term, adjudicated in court.
Everything you described other than the lawsuit itself just sounds like how the music business works.
Shady deals, fraud,
unfair treatment, fraud that's covered up. It's like does he not know what he signed up for?
The parent company picking winners and losers beforehand.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, that's how it works.
Yeah. Well, there was a completely different but also hilarious lawsuit where, if anyone knows the Bruno Mars song, what's it called? When I Was Your Man. Miley Cyrus answered that song. He says, I should have brought you flowers. And her song says, I could buy myself flowers. His song says, whatever, I should have taken you dancing. She says, like, I can dance by myself. So anyways, the lyrics are very kind of structurally answering his song 10 years later or whatever it was. And now Bruno Mars and some of the co-writers of that song are totally fine with this. But one rights holder for the Bruno song decided to sue Miley Cyrus for, I presume, some sort of copyright infringement. And I think this is going to be an interesting case because to my ear, and I would assume to most like musicologists' ears, they're not the same song. The lyrics are different. The melodies are different chords. So there isn't really a what would you call it, like a stolen moment or whatever in terms of copyright infringement. And I don't think answering an influence should be.
You can't copyright that.
Right. And then it also is hilarious to me that the actual artist and probably, a primary power behind the song, Bruno Mars himself, is like, this lawsuit is stupid. I don't want to sue her. Like,
yeah, I mean, that seems like it falls under, like, the concept seems like it falls under fair use. You're commenting on a work that exists with a new work.
Yep.
But yeah, this person hopefully will be regretting this decision because I had when I was in college, one of my professors was the expert witness on the Achy Breaky Heart lawsuit, where a songwriter sued Billy Ray Cyrus, who Billy Ray Cyrus said he wrote it, but the songwriter said, "Hey, I sent a demo tape. Here's the demo tape. I sent it to you that I recorded while driving in my truck," or whatever the whole deal was. And this predates your song. It came down to like when the actual tape itself was manufactured. But in class, our professor showed how he had the two songs lined up. And this one, the note went up at the end of the phrase. This one went down. I'm like, that's it. They're basically the same song, but because that one note went up and not down, we're saying they're different. I mean, it was pretty much
just
the
a
same.
twist, just a
But
little twist.
But they still said it wasn't the same. But then recently we had who was that? Otis Redding. Was it Otis Redding?
Robin Thicke. It was the Marvin Gaye song.
Marvin Gaye. And I'm like, there's nothing similar about these two songs.
No, it's just a vibe. It was like a party vibe.
I'm like, how could you copyright a vibe? That means I'm gonna copyright rock. All rock music is mine now.
Depressing acoustic folk songs are mine.
See, Chris has got that on lock. So everyone owes him money. So that's why this one I think should just be thrown out. But if it gets any ground, that would, to me, some of these lawsuits just erode copyright in a way AI is threatening. Because if everything is going to be copyright, I mean, that's the problem with certain like why you can't copyright a title, you can't copyright specific words, because then you can't use the language, you can't communicate, and it all breaks down. So I think there's a difference between protection of ideas and just trying to be a bully. And so
we have one more lawsuit to mention, but before we do, at least in this category, we have more lawsuits to mention in the AI department. But I'm going to say, Malia was saying, my student did a project on the diss track between Drake and Kendrick Lamar and the whole rivalry, but I didn't know about the lawsuit. So yes, if you go to you're asking, if you go to that blog post I linked above, there's links to all these cases and further news stories. What's hilarious is that Kendrick Lamar used the most dated music theory joke in his song, Not Like Us. They're not the same song. Portlandia, someone copyrighted the key of G. Nice.
And if you're just joining us, because we've had a lot of people join in, this is the Music Career Study Group. We're talking about the biggest news stories of 2024. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Say hi in the comments. If there's a story that you thought was big, feel free to mention it. If there's something that really impacted your career this year, let us know. And we're going to keep going.
Yeah, well, the last lawsuit in this category is that Donald Trump used an awful lot of music in his campaign, as politicians do, and they're on the road doing rallies and campaign events. And some of the artists were really pissed about it. And they said, stop using my song. Please stop using my song. I think Jack White was one of them. Beyonce might have been. It was a bunch of notable artists. And some of them even took it to court to try to force him to stop using their music in his campaigns. So I think this is an interesting question because, I'm not an expert about it. I do see it as a gray area where, like, on the one hand, we kind of live in a society where if copyright protected content gets played in public, they are paid for that through their, presumably sync licensing. If it's on TV, if it's just in a public space, there might be performance royalties that go to the songwriters and the publisher. So it's sort of like that's taken care of. However, tying a song to a particular campaign is drawing some like brand energy away from the artist and towards a politician. So it does seem like a realm in which an artist should have some say. I just don't know where that area, that line is, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, this one always frustrates me because whenever you see an artist complaining like, this politician's using my music without permission, usually the artist is 100% wrong because the artist doesn't control the permission by law. It's the master recording owner and the publisher. Mm-hmm. And as Chris mentioned, the venue, you can play a song in a venue, assuming that venue is properly licensed to the performance PROs. As in America, it's ASCAP, CSAC, BMI. Other countries, you'll have your own. And so with those public performance licenses, you have the ability to perform any song live in that venue as long as they've paid their fee. And even in political, I know in this particular instance, there was, I saw a comment that they had approached the proper rights holders and gotten permission. But again, the artist is not the rights holder. That's the problem. But it gets associated with the artist. And so I think it's maybe not even a gray area. It's just an area that's not addressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the artist complains, and usually the politician will stop using it because they don't want the artist out there crapping all over it. But at the same time, the politician in all these cases I've seen, I haven't seen anybody do it where they weren't legally correct.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things that's weird.
So Malia's saying the venue license isn't enough as far as I understand in my research.
But it also depends on how it's being used. Like if it's literally just music that's playing before an event, I think there's so much
on the speakers. Yeah.
Just like when you deal with sync licensing, there's a whole bunch of different considerations. It's like how it's being used. Is it just background and music in the back that's very audible? Is it a main theme song that, like if it's the main theme song of the political campaign, then absolutely that's going to have more weight. But still, that's like the legalities of, is that really addressed in copyright law? And I have not seen any evidence that it's truly addressed, but I'm not a copyright expert either.
Yeah, so just real quick for Bliss Trezar Records, you asked about tips for making a music video. I put in the comments, here's an article on our blog where I talk about 7 trends that are working in social video content for musicians. And Kevin and I, in last week's Music Career Study Group live stream, talked about 10 different music video types you can make. And we had some other context and tips for that. So check that out, as well as that article I linked.
Yep.
All right.
Anything else on lawsuits? It felt like this year. One thing I'll mention the Ticketmaster thing in a minute, in a second. But it felt like this year was a year of big lawsuits. Like we still have some on the AI front that we haven't talked about yet because we saved them for the AI section. But it also felt very random. Like some things like these cases with politics that they've been going on for years. But it feels like maybe we're getting closer to really addressing those issues more thoroughly. And some of the copyright claims, there was a bunch there was some others not on the list that maybe weren't as significant, but were similar where it felt like a stretch. And then the Ticketmaster thing is huge, and there's still a lot happening with that. There's even something happening here locally in the Portland area because Ticketmaster and Live Nation owned by Ticketmaster, or is it the other way around? I think it's the other way around.
The other way around.
Okay, yeah. So Live Nation is trying to build a 3,000 seat venue here in Portland. And so there's a lot of people that are just very in tune to the monopoly practices of Ticketmaster and Live Nation, how they work together to push people out of markets, make venues shut down that aren't using them for ticketing, and withhold artists because Live Nation is a promotion company and will, be responsible for promoting a whole tour. So they get to decide where tours actually happen, what venues get their tours. And so all this stuff is really playing out big time in the Portland scene right now. The venue is not doing anything, Live Nation's not doing anything illegal. And so looks like it's moving forward. And it is a need in Portland. That's what's crazy, is that there is no 3,000 seat venue that hosts rock shows, pop shows, that kind of thing here in town. There is like the place where Broadway type shows happen, and I don't think it's the best venue for that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's a big thing. You've probably seen, if you're in America, you've probably seen our government trying to wrangle some things with ticketing fees and hidden fees this year. It's still ongoing. And I think that's going to be something that plays out pretty big in 2025.
I'm laughing because you said, how is it that in 2024 we're finally addressing this copyright and political campaigns question? Like, how is this not an issue in 2016 or 2000 or
Yeah,
any?
yeah.
People have been using
Oh
music with
yeah, because I
campaigns for
remember going back into like the '90s when I started paying attention. It's like artists getting mad because some politician, probably, I think it's been Neil Young every time. It's like it's
Yeah.
always Neil Young.
Although now,
Why do they keep using his songs and then he just throws a tantrum?
although to loop back to an earlier story, he did sell his catalog, right? So and then the other thing is like, didn't Pearl Jam sue Ticketmaster in like 1820 for being a monopoly? Like, how is this just now a case the Department of Justice or a question that's being asked? It's like, I've been hearing rumors about them being a monopoly for 30 something years. So
Yeah, yeah. Oh, this is Bliss Strazar. I don't know how to pronounce that. Records. We're here for an hour. It's a weekly study group. This is our last one of the year. Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern every week.
And Brian is saying that they got a billboard in Times Square, placed by Midnight Records. They own their own masters. So crap like that does not happen. Get a marketing team, or be your own marketing team.
Yeah.
All right. Well, our next category of biggest news stories of 2024 is AI related, and I sort of thought that the first half of the year was all this continued hype around like, what will AI mean for music creation and for humanity, and the big questions and stuff about how tools would be used or integrated or replace us, those sort of existential questions. And then it seemed to die. I don't know if AI just hit a plateau or if we all just got sick of hearing about it, and it seemed to go away, only to be then replaced by really big stories about AI and legal battles. And the first of those was that the three major labels got together and they sued Udio and Suno, two music AI companies.
Probably the two biggest that have surfaced.
Yep. And they were being sued because the suspicion at the time was that those two companies had trained their models on all of the major label catalogs, which were protected under copyright. And so the question at hand is, do they have the right to do that? And that's gone to court, and who knows, probably go to the Supreme Court. But it's an interesting question because I don't know where I stand on that one, actually. It's like humans get to listen to stuff and then reinterpret it as our own new content. Yeah. Why wouldn't a machine be able to do that if what we expect of this machine is to know stuff and then do something well? So at the same time, I can see the argument for, hey, if you're going to use my stuff to teach you how to make someone else money, like maybe it'd be nice to have either permission or some kind of royalty structure set up for that. But I don't know how you track that stuff. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Like you mentioned, the year was split. The first half was characterized as, I think, every company trying to say they have something that's AI just so they could get funding, which most of them
automation.
That's
not AI. That's just automation.
Yeah, and so suddenly every company was on I'm going to conferences. I go to a lot of conferences, and the first half of the year is all these panels about AI and these companies saying, "Yeah, we use AI." I'm like, you don't have no AI. You have nothing. So they would I was at a conference and this one company was saying, "Yeah, we have all these AI marketing tools for musicians." And I'm like, but they were vague. They didn't really say what or how it worked or how AI is really used. And I log in and it's really just, oh, you can schedule your tweets or you can schedule your posts. I'm like, that is not AI. Automation is not AI.
Thanks. I had TweetDeck in 2010.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. So the first half of the year was all that, like either doom and gloom or companies rushing to say that they had something AI so they could get more funding. The second half, like you mentioned, has been lawsuits. The doom and gloom is almost vanished. And I think part of it is also that all the things that we've seen about AI, in fact, I saw one yesterday about another new video generator the video that they showed, look, this is amazing. You can't even tell it's AI. This is going to revolutionize Hollywood. It's like, well, that was the one and only output that AI machine has done. And yes, it looks that good, but you spent years getting it to that point.
Mhm.
And when you go there and try it yourself, it just turns out garbage. And you're like, okay, so what we've been sold about where AI isn't the reality yet.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of legalities that I think are going to play out in 2025 that I think some of the funding will dry up. I think part of the industry we don't have, actually, we probably should have had this on the list. I think an honorable mention would have been the rampant fraud issue in
Oh, right.
in the music business. We don't have that on the list. We should have. But I think one of the things that is going to hinder AI is the fact that all the DSPs do not want it because it's not because it may sound bad or whatever, but it's just a lever for fraud to pull to just drive more fraud. The majors don't want it. They don't want it diluting the system. The platforms don't want it. And as we'll see in just a second, it's going to be tied very closely to fraud.
Yeah. Well, before we move on from that suit, there's just one last thing I want to say. I've said it on this stream before, but there's an irony in this lawsuit between the three labels and Suno and Udio. And it's that if the labels win, the damages will be so severe. I think it's $150,000 per track that's been trained upon. And how big and vast are the major label these companies would probably never be able to afford the damages, in which case they will just get acquired or inherited or whatever the legal term is by the major labels, who then own the very technology they hated, so they can train it on their own stuff with full permission because now it's all the same company. So in a way, I can almost envision a future where the results are no different. It's just that it's permissioned and monetized in-house, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
yeah. I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with these play out. We've got more lawsuits worth mentioning related to AI.
yeah, one just vague one is that there are some suits and some counter legislation being drawn up that protects people from having their likeness manipulated by AI, and just kind of protecting brand recognizability and all that sort of stuff. But then you mentioned Michael Smith earlier. Cautionary tale, a guy who used one of those companies we mentioned earlier to make, what was it, millions of songs, thousand? I can't remember how many songs
It was I thought it was 10 million. Well, it was $10 million, but I thought it was 1 million tracks.
Yeah, some crazy amount of tracks made by AI. And
Boomy was
then,
the service implicated in it.
didn't it go on to further implicate streaming fraud? So it's like all these junk AI tracks and then committing streaming fraud to boost their streams and monetize them. He's facing huge penalties.
Yeah, that's I think this is one of the big cases. And if you want to read more about it, it's crazy. There's a link to it in the blog article we've got pinned in the comments. And yeah, this person, you went to one of these services, cranked out an enormous amount of AI tracks, and then sprinkled them throughout thousands of playlists.
Mm-hmm.
Drove a lot of fake traffic to those playlists. And the crappy thing is those playlists included legitimate artists as well. That's how they kind of hide it. It's like, instead of having one track that you send a lot of fake traffic to, that's very obvious. You make millions of fake tracks, put them in a bunch of playlists with real artists, and it's much harder to track. And that's what they did to the tune of $10 million.
Whew. Yeah. Well,
why get a real job when you can commit fraud?
I guess in this case, the warning is because you'll get caught and thrown in prison or sued for $10 million in damages. Another thing in the AI category, it's not a lawsuit, but it's kind of an ethical question that's been raised. If you paid attention during this Christmas season, Bing Crosby is back with new music being made with one of the members of BTS. And how long has Bing Crosby been dead? So there's this whole new frontier of posthumous releases. And I think it's a weird question because for the people's estates, it gives them almost endless ways of monetizing that artist's music that they, own that person's likeness in their catalog. And so it's a good thing in that way, but then also like just ethically, like what does it mean to have an artist continue to make music after they're dead? Like I'm pretty sure when I'm dead, I don't want anyone making things in my name. Like that was my life. I'm done. And it's very different. It used to be like, oh, Prince has 25,000 unreleased songs. Like, yeah, but those are songs he actually made them. And
hey, Jimi Hendrix keeps releasing more records than my band every year.
Right.
Yeah,
but it's different when you can suddenly just take Prince and have him make 1 million songs in a minute.
Which I wouldn't be surprised if the Jimi Hendrix estate does this, because they have been very aggressive. I remember when back in the day, I worked at Tower Records, and every year there was a new Jimi Hendrix greatest hits album. I'm like, where do these greatest hits keep coming from? And it'd be like unreleased tracks or another live thing that they dug up. And I was like, man, this guy's been dead a long time and he still has new releases out every year.
So prolific up there in heaven.
So I know some of these estates will do that. And I think I know that, again, this will play out more in 2025, this issue, but beyond just music, the movie industry is dealing with this as well. Like the right of your likeness and your voice, being able to authorize your personhood, because even there's been issues with I can't remember if it was a commercial or a show where somebody used an AI voice that was clearly trained on a famous actress that turned the gig down, and then suddenly it sounds like her. So there's a lot of that stuff happening where it's like, where is the line of like, I own this, and how? Yeah. It's going to be interesting, because it's like at some point, how do you? I exist. Dang it! How do I prove I exist? And you can't rip off my likeness. It's a real big problem for me, Chris, as you probably gather.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it will be a problem for me one day. Yeah, that reminded me of those Star Wars instances where Leia is on screen as a young person, and what's his name?
But yeah,
Governor Tarkin. Yeah, right. Suddenly appear. I mean, not convincingly. I didn't really like either of those. But it's a filmic version of this music story.
Well, even just, thinking about, I know one of our coworkers here, it's the BandLab Technologies family. She works for the Grammys as well. And there's a whole thing about in the Grammys, like, of if it's got AI in it. I can't remember what the exact rule is, but I know that there's, if you just can't generate an AI track and get nominated for a Grammy. But you think about just down into the simplicity of production. Say, you do a bunch of vocal takes and you're listening to mixes later and you're like, man, we really didn't, that vocal just doesn't quite have the quality I want. But AI could just learn your voice and you could easily fix it. And you're like, where's the line there? Because you used an AI tool to save money, and get what you wanted ultimately for your performance, but it still wasn't your voice.
Right. And that is an AI tool I would definitely use. Michael, wasn't there something about CEO of Spotify saying they didn't need artists or something like that? I don't remember that, but he definitely had a quote we are going to address in probably about 10 minutes.
And hello, Michael. Michael's the lead singer of my band.
Oh, that Michael. Hello.
I'm wearing a shirt right now.
Now I see the picture. Okay. Yeah, so we'll get to that infamous controversial quote from, I think it was.
I should say I'm the guitar player from Michael's band is how it really should be. But
there you go.
Yeah, what I think the quote he may be thinking about was
that the cost of creating art is nearing zero.
Yeah, I think it was in that whole thing. There was some quotes. That was, I believe that was in end of 2023. If not, it was the beginning of this year. But yeah, um, it was very controversial.
It was definitely this year. I think it was this summer
Oh,
because
okay.
I put it in our list. But I was going to mention moving away from AI in the future. I wanted to move to the past because vintage stuff had a huge, sort of, it's had a comeback, but it continued increases in, well, let me just say, radio, terrestrial radio, AM, FM radio was still the most popular way of consuming music. So if you're 13 and up, 32% of listening happens on radio, which blew my mind. I had no idea it was still that powerful, at least in the aggregate. And then another, just by the way, streaming was a close second at 28%. But then cassette tapes and vinyl continued to go up in terms of manufacturing. And then cassette and vinyl players, sales and repair, all that was dramatically increasing. So people are definitely still enjoying that tactile analog experience.
Yeah, it's weird. In I can say this in well, it was 2023, but it played out still in 2024. I got a new car at the end of 2023, but my other car, which my daughter is about to get her license, she's going to be driving. The CD player, I was still using a tape adapter to get music into the stereo. Great stereo, but you had to use the tape adapter. That all broke, and so I was stuck listening to the radio all of 2023 when I was driving around. And it was quite eye-opening that the state of radio, especially pop radio, it's like, yes, there's new music being played, but so the playlist is about 10 songs, and you will hear those 10 songs forever. And it's much different where radio used to, you'd still hear songs all the time on radio, but you'd have a lot of new stuff popping in and the playlist would be broader. It is so narrow. I've heard we talked about Flowers already in this episode. I've heard that song like 1,000 times just because of radio.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's still where the money is. If you get a hit song on radio, you're going to be making tons of cash. But however, I've heard that it's one of those things where you hear people talking online and you can't substantiate it because you don't know what their true deal is that they've signed. People saying that a pop hit like that now is worth far less than a pop hit like that was, in the 80s or 90s. But it's hard to know because a lot of these songs have 20 writers on them and you don't know what deal they signed. And it's like, yeah, if you got 20 writers, you're not going to make as much money. You should have thought about that.
Well, your playlist comment, I realized probably like a week or two ago, I dropped I bring my daughter to her violin lesson. So her lesson is an hour long. And on the way pulling into the driveway to the place where she has a lesson, there was a song playing. When we got back in the car an hour later, that song was playing. I'm like, their playlist isn't even an hour long. It's 59 minutes long. What?
Yeah, you'll hear the latest Billie Eilish song a million times. You'll hear Flowers. You'll hear the Benson Boone song over, and it's like I knew this happened in the Small Town Poets. We were in the Christian market. I had DJs tell me this is what's happened to radio. When you guys were on a major label and we were playing your latest singles, we would add 3, 4, 5 new songs a week. And you were lucky if a song went number 1 for 2 weeks. 3 weeks was unheard of. Now it's like songs will stay, they'll add 1 new song a month and songs will stay in rotation. If you get in rotation, if you're lucky enough, it'll be there for months and months on end. Which is kind of mind blowing because you think that the problem that radio has is that people have endless options on Spotify. So you'd want to get more
diversity.
Yeah. But instead they double down on just the very limited pop hits.
Brian saying we never use AI for our videos. More organic approach is best for them. We have another section of our news roundup, which is all about drama amongst platforms. So TikTok, Spotify, stuff like that. I'll go through it quickly. First, a lot of things happened this year that solidified TikTok's reputation as an extremely important place for music discovery. And the influence that an artist can have on TikTok directly relates to their chart position. And, that's great for them, but not everyone in the industry agrees. And certain people were definitely not thinking that virality or the chance to go viral is worth the trade-off of the very low payments that you get. So Universal Music Group was the sort of biggest story of the year. They removed their catalog and their publishing catalog from TikTok in protest and said, they don't pay fairly. We're taking our stuff down. Now, it didn't last long. A lot of their artists didn't like that. And they said, hey, like, you might not like this, but TikTok's one of our ways where we have a connection with our audience, which is worth something to the artist beyond what it's worth to the label, because the artist can get, concert ticket sales or whatever. There's a lot of other benefits to the artist. So Universal got a lot of pressure and put their music back on TikTok. I forget how many months it lasted, but
They did
not
have
too
some
long.
concessions, though. I mean, they came to an agreement, and of course, we
Yeah.
don't know what those details are. I'm assuming Universal got what they wanted,
Yeah,
at least something.
could be. Well, then also in TikTok news, the United States government said, hey, TikTok, you have to sell yourself, or ByteDance, the parent company, has to sell TikTok to be a separate company, presumably one that's owned with a significant ownership share in the United States. Or if you don't, you will be banned. And this is working its way probably to the Supreme Court as we speak. Interesting to see how that plays out. Any
Yeah, and this
thoughts
is
on
going to
that?
play out very quickly. I just saw this morning that I believe the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case, and I can't remember the exact date, but it was in January, and the ban is supposed to go into effect the 20th.
Oh, I didn't realize it was coming up that soon.
Yes. Oh yeah, it's
Like
super
as
urgent.
in tomorrow?
Oh no, January.
January 20th. Okay.
January. I thought it was like the same day as the inauguration. Oh no, I think it's the 19th, because President-elect Trump made a comment saying that he actually loves TikTok and wants to help make it figure it out because he loves TikTok. So, but he said, I won't be able to do anything about it till the next day. And the ban is like on the 19th. So I think the Supreme Court's hearing it like around the 10th or something. I saw the date this morning, but yeah. So
Interesting.
they're saying that, it's owned by the Chinese, and that the Chinese government's been using it to spy on Americans. So it was banned, and then it went to another appeals court that upheld the ban, and so that's why it's a rush to the Supreme Court. That all just played out. So the bottom line is, regardless about what you think about all this, if you've got a significant audience on TikTok, you better be trying to harvest that list ASAP.
Get them onto
Because
your list or onto
because
Instagram
that
or
could
whatever.
all vanish on, like, that could all be gone. That could be gone.
Speaking of things that disappear and could be gone, if you have a track on Spotify with less than 1,000 streams per year, your money's gone. Because at the end of last year, at the end of 2023, Spotify announced they're going to make some pretty drastic changes to their payment rules. And, there were 3 or 4 pillars of these things that were presented under the guise of addressing streaming fraud and stuff like that. But one of them, to me, was very clearly about trying to protect the royalty pool for the big players. So we've discussed how that all works in previous episodes. But basically, if you don't get a more than 1,000 plays for a single track in a 12-month rolling basis, that track doesn't make any money. And now the little money you would have made for that, it's not a lot. But when you add up the many, many millions of artists that are on there who have a similar, it adds up to a lot of money that then stays in the royalty pool to be paid to big labels, artists who are getting significant traction. So that was a huge thing that took effect this year, even though it was announced last year.
Yeah, and it didn't make our list, but the main company and a lot of the quotes that was pushing for that was Universal Music Group, and their CEO very publicly said that expressed a lot of disdain for the independent artist market. And
called most DIY or self-releasing distributors merchants of garbage.
yes, merchants of garbage. Well, guess what just happened last week? That same company just purchased Downtown Music, which owns CD Baby. So it doesn't officially go through until the middle of next year. It has to pass all these regulation things, especially in the EU and UK and whatnot. But it will be interesting to see what a company that called a segment of the market merchants of garbage, and now they own that merchant. So that or will own, and that will be definitely end of an era, Chris. You and I have a long-standing history of working in the DIY space for said company, and are no longer there. But it's I don't know. We knew it was going to go this way years ago, but
it's an interesting and perhaps I think at some point we realized it was inevitable. But for a company that was started as an anti-label, like literally those were the words, to then just be owned by one of the three massive labels,
the biggest one.
Yep. Is quite interesting. So will they sell it off? Will they keep it? Will they integrate it into some other? We'll see.
Which Capitol Records, what I mentioned earlier, is owned by Universal, which is owned by Comcast, which is
before we leave Spotify, two more things on that. Not only did they change how they pay artists, but they wanted to change things about how they monetize music in general. And if they bundle music with audiobooks, they argue they can pay less to musicians. And so this is, being fought out again. And their arguments are relying on some precedent that I think it was at Amazon. Other companies have done bundling and gotten away with paying lower royalties, and they're trying it. And then the last thing on Spotify is that, in the summertime, Daniel Ek said, he had a tweet, that the cost of creating art and content is nearing zero. And the whole internet exploded and everyone wanted his head. And I'm like, that's the thing. Like, I could see being pissed at him for a lot of other things, but this one I thought was taken out of context, because when you put it, how do I say this? Like, it used to cost $20,000 or $100,000 or $1 million to make a record. And now you could still spend that money if you really wanted to, but you could also just pick up your phone and use an app to make a song for $0. And that is far more the norm these days, of spending zero to very little. And so the math just bears out that what he was saying is factually true. The cost of creating content is nearing zero. It doesn't mean you have to spend zero. You can still spend a lot of money. But just people were so pissed at him. Yeah.
The way it was all worded, I think could have been better. But also, and I think he was not trying to be like some sinister CEO, like talking down to the creative class that he uses to make money. But I feel like his position, he should have been more careful with those words, because he had to know that was going to be taken out of, that it was going to be subtexted right there. That's the quote. Let's just put it up there.
Because he even mentioned the work of Marcus Aurelius, this 2,000-year-old Roman emperor, some writings by that guy saying, like, it's interesting to see what lasts and what dies off and what we still remember and return to as having quality and merit and all this stuff. And that will be all the more interesting to see what survives from this moment, because the cost is nearing zero, which means everyone can do it, everyone who has the desire. And so there's just infinitely more stuff now. So how do survival mechanisms work for art now? That was the point he was trying to make, I'm pretty sure. And it just, got taken out of context.
Yeah. It's I think this is going to be, so here's something Mark says. The internet was supposed to help the artist bypass the mainstream labels and market directly to its audience. Instead, we sold ourselves to a whole new group of grifters. While that may be true, I think there is some things that these set the stage for that are changing the way the independent artist community looks at the market. And so if you look at it, if you go back to the beginning of when like I know CD Baby was was like considered the first one that really platform that really took off. There was some others at the time that allowed people to sell CDs to fans, but I think CD Baby took off because it was the first one that was really built from the artist perspective, not a e-commerce perspective. And so at that point the market was created, but most people, the barrier to entry was still extremely high. You had to have CDs. Making records was super expensive, and a lot of the artists that were doing it were still operating like the label world, even if they were doing it all themselves. You fast forward to today and it's very different. There's so many platforms and ways to create so many areas where fans exist, and methods of having a career. And there's people that have a career that doesn't involve releasing much music at all. There's other people that's all they do. They don't play shows, they don't do anything. So I think what it means to have a career is so different, and artists are just, you don't have to be, back in the day you had to be on the shelf at all the places. Now I don't think you have to, and I think you're going to see a big trend of artists like having their music on Spotify is nice. I'll have it there, but it's not going to be the focus moving forward for a lot of people. There's already lots of talk about that, but I think in 2025, you're going to see new methods pop up. And we'll talk more about that in our preview episode at the beginning of 2025.
Yeah, and I didn't put that in this year-end recap, but was it Pitchfork's album of the year? There was some notable music publication. Their album of the year was not on Spotify.
Pitchfork.
Yeah. Yep. And so that's a perfect example for that artist who just got a ton of praise and accolades and fans. Wasn't important to have it on streaming.
And I'm sure they will eventually. And that's not to say that people are ditching Spotify altogether, but whether their release happens and it's a very specific place where the fan community comes together and experiences something, like an album that's not available on Spotify. Hey, we're all going to listen to it here. We're going to engage with it here. We're going to love the comments and the dialogue back and forth around it. Then we'll put it on Spotify in the future. But for artists, I think that's going to be a big piece of how they look at releases, that it's about them and the fans. The platforms don't matter. We can't let the platforms rule our world. It's the music and the fans. That's all that matters. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, we've got two more quick categories here. And this next one is about concerts and how in 2024, it was continuing evidence that for lesser known artists and smaller venues, it's tough. It's hard to tour as an independent artist. It's hard to tour even as a, kind of lesser known artist on a label. And a lot of venues are struggling. However, despite all that, big megastars are doing better than ever in the live arena. And Taylor Swift concluded her Eras tour, broke all kinds of records. It was the highest grossing tour of all time. She generated something like $6.5 billion for local economies in the US and Canada alone. And this was a world tour. And then it was nice to see recently that she gave hundreds of millions of dollars in bonuses to her team who were on the road with her and stuff like that. So anyways, clearly the most successful people are succeeding more than ever before. Coldplay similarly joined the $1 billion tour club. I think they were the first group in history to gross that much money from a single run of concert dates. And then Adele and The Weeknd are doing mega concerts, arenas are what, 20, 30,000, stadiums, maybe a lot more. Mega concerts sometimes are in the hundreds of thousands. And so if you are popular enough, you can pull off one of those things and rake in a ton of money.
Yeah, this is, I think, an interesting story that's been really playing out this past year, because like you said, those huge tours, but what's happening in the local scene feels like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And I think, we talked about all the Ticketmaster stuff, and I know we're up on an hour, so we got to rush through these last few ones, but the uh the Ticketmaster issue plays into this, but in all that, it was discussed that going to concerts now is a luxury item.
Mhm.
And that was depressing because it's like those tours you mentioned, people are like picking those, like the family vacation is to go see Taylor Swift. And we're going to like going to Disneyland. We're going to set aside money and spend a lot of money. But the idea of just going to concerts on a regular basis is cost prohibitive to a point where you're just going to pick those ones where it becomes the luxury item and not go to a lot of shows. And I think
Yeah.
that's really impacting the mid tier and lower tier, because in that level, we had a lot of tours canceled this year because costs were so high and it just wasn't worth it. And ticket
Yeah,
sales were soft. Yeah.
and I remember in the 90s, I suppose maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, a concert by a very famous artist would still be 35, $40. I mean, maybe someone like Madonna could charge 100, the Eagles could charge $250. But at the time, $250 for an Eagles concert felt absolutely outrageous, and people were pissed. Paul McCartney wants to charge you 170. What an outrage.
Yeah.
And now that's cheap. Like, and adjusting for inflation aside, like if someone's like, oh, that concert's $175 to see a megastar, you'd be like, whoa, that's cheap. You have to set aside thousands of dollars sometimes to see these people, and it's crazy. And then meanwhile, local music is in a rough spot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. But yeah, so I think with all the ticket issue, and also I think in 2024, like late 2023 and 2024 was like where every artist was trying to rush back out on tour. They had taken a couple of years break from the pandemic and like waiting till the dust settled some. And there was a lot of tours happening. And so it'll be interesting to see how this all levels out.
Mark is no fan of dynamic pricing, which
yeah, that may have lived a short life because
after the Oasis debacle, people
I know that there was a big artist last week that was making a big thing about, might have been Pearl Jam, about they would not, any upcoming shows would not have dynamic pricing.
Just one question here. No, you are not screwed if you don't tour. There are a lot of ways to make money in music. You can, just sell your music. You can make it for sync licensing. You could do live streams and sell merch that way. You don't have to be on the road. There's many, many more career paths these days.
Yeah. All right. What was the last one we had, Chris?
The last one is a commercial.
Oh, yeah.
The biggest thing that happened at Reverb Nation, in my estimation, this year was we launched unlimited music distribution for premium members. So if you are a member, you can release as much music as you want with no extra charge. That's albums, EPs, singles, remixes, sped up versions, collaborations, demos, live track, whatever it is. If you're proud of it, you can release it for no extra cost. And that, of course, still comes with unlimited promotion through opportunities, all the host of musician tools we offer. So definitely worth it to be a member.
Yeah, that's for premium membership that comes with unlimited distribution and lots more on the way for Reverb Nation. So yeah, keep checking out. If you're not familiar, because there's a question here, like Mark has a question about Reverb Nation had a data leak several years ago. That's probably when it was owned by different people. Reverb Nation was acquired by BandLab Technologies, who Chris and I work for. And there's some pieces that were put into BandLab, the app. And then we started, Chris and I got on board and we started revamping the platform and doing new stuff. So you've probably seen the blog is very active now. You'll see Chris and I doing these things. You'll see a lot more development starting to roll out and take shape. So a lot of new things. So anything related to what the previous owners did, I wouldn't have any knowledge of and don't want to speak to. I can tell you everything is very secure now.
Yep. And then one other development that is worth mentioning is that we struck a deal with Warner Chappell Music Publishing. And so that gives artists the ability to not just have publishing administration services, but if they have a track that's doing super well, it could potentially be an on-ramp to just get a publishing deal without having to go shop around. It's just more of a in-house handoff. So that's been exciting, and there's a lot more stuff in the works like that.
Yeah, one thing that I really like about where BandLab Technologies is positioning BandLab, Reverb Nation, and all the other brands that are in the family of our company is that we're really trying to play across the total ecosystem of the music business, not just be like the anti-label, that there's opportunities at all levels and there's needs at all levels. And at the end of the day, we want the creator community, the artist community to be represented well and to make sure their needs are met. But sometimes your needs are met by working with a label. But as long as you know what you're getting yourself into, that could be the best thing for you. So we're positioning our brands to work across the spectrum of the music business, not just for one segment of artists.
I'm silent because I'm typing a link to someone who asked about premium costs, host of music tools.
And I think that's oh, you're posting a link. Is that what you're doing?
It's going to post one thing. Here we go. So who asked that? I think it was Mark. That'll have the link to the different tiers and services and pricing. But again, premium comes with unlimited distribution, unlimited promotion, and then all the promo tools that musicians get through Reverb Nation.
Yep, there you have it. All right. That brings us to the end of the 2024 season of the Music Career Study Group. Mark your calendars for 2025 every Thursday. And, you know, we're going to try and up our game in 2025, adding maybe some more guests.
Adding hats.
Yeah. I mean, you've been a hat light this year.
I have been. I need to get back to hat heavy.
Yes. And yeah, so be looking for that in the coming year. But again, this is a place where you can come ask questions about music marketing, promotion, distribution. Chris and I try to be accessible and help where we can, and make sure that you have a voice. And so that's why it's a great place to hang out. And we want to hear from your experience as well. So make it a priority to join us in 2025 every Thursday. We'll have a good time.
Mark is going to mark his calendar.
Excellent. Excellent. All right.
Well, I hope everyone uses their time off, if they get time off during the holidays, to make some music or up your marketing game, and we'll see you next year.
All right. See ya.
Bye.